Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Financial Tides. Today we are going to hit the topic of what to do with 1,000, 10,000, or $100,000. I'm your host today, Taylor Perillo, certified financial planner, and we'll just dive right into it. So, this question really came from what do you do if you just woke up and you have $1,000 or $10,000 that's now in your name? It showed up in your bank account, you received it via inheritance or you now have some sort of windfall, like say a bonus at work that you want to know what should I do with this money? No strings attached. 60% of Americans, and this is where the topic came from, said that they would use any financial windfall to pay off debt, but most of them don't. So they get the money, they don't do it. Even though if they actually did get it, they're telling themselves that they would pay off debt. When the money comes in, it doesn't actually happen. So the first thing before acting is to ask yourself really three essential questions we want you to be making sure that you're taking a deep dive in and really thinking about. The first one is, what's the job I want this money to do? So we want to be very intentional with our money. We want to figure out what the money that we have and what is it there to do for us. So is it an emergency fund? Do we want to buy time back? Do we want to fund a dream? There's a bunch of different things that you can have the money do for you, but you need to kind of have an idea so you can be intentional with it. The next one is, where am I financially and where am I going and what you want to be doing. So that's kind of your goal mindset of where are you currently, how close are you to your financial goals, and then what can you do to actually make this money be in line with your financial goals. So again, back to intentionality. Are you trying to get out of debt? Are you trying to build a foundation, or are you really trying to optimize your financial situation so you could achieve some of the more lofty goals that you're looking to complete? And then the very next thing, and I think this is more of the emotional side of it, is what am I going to regret most not doing with this money in 5 years? So it kind of gives you the idea of that long-term vision and kind of short-term temptation. So you're looking at both sides of it. If it's something that you really feel like, hey, I want to do this trip while I'm young and healthy, but there's a scenario where in 5 years from now, you didn't do that trip and you say, I'm not really healthy enough to make that travel plan anymore and go that distance or be on a flight that long. We don't want you to have those regrets. So it kind of balances out that short term and long term to help you frame your decision in a way that you can use the money and be intentional with the money, but also not feel like you're selling yourself short. So going through that, there's kind of four financial stages that you can be in your life that you kind of have to realize where you are. And the first one is financial survival. So that's living paycheck to paycheck. You don't really have any savings. You have some high interest debt out there, and you really are just trying to get by. Every single penny you have is going to paying bills, and you don't really have any way to do anything outside of that. So, we'll cover all the different things with the money in each stage after this. So I'll just cover the stages first. Stage two is stability. So you have some savings, you really have most of your high interest debt covered, and you have managed cash flow. But you're not necessarily thriving and having a lot of extra money to spend on other things. You're just kind of getting by, and you're not necessarily living paycheck to paycheck, but you're not really growing your assets at a large stage. The next is growth. So that's investing consistently. Your goals are in motion. You're actually starting to accomplish some of them, and your funds are going to be growing with you. And then the last is financial freedom. So we did a whole separate podcast on finding out your financial freedom number. And that's when work is optional. You have your long-term plan in place. You're following it, you're living up to it, and you're starting to check off some of those items that are there for you that you really want to make sure you accomplish. So, first off, $1,000. You get $1,000. You're in that first stage, which is the survival stage. You probably want to stop some of the bleeding. That's the first thing, first and foremost, what you need to do. So, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have any savings, you have high interest debt, first thing you want to do is get some money in savings. So if an emergency comes up, you're not furthering your high interest debt situation. So maybe $500 to $1,000. Thousand's usually the safest, but get some money in the bank for that. So in this scenario, maybe split it 500 to paying off some debt, 500 to making sure that the debt situation doesn't get further. So catching up on some bills, avoiding late fees, giving yourself a little bit of breathing room to try to get yourself out of that debt situation, and then try to do some quick win of shrinking your debt, wiping out of balance so that you can have a little bit of extra cash flow maybe to roll somewhere else. The second stage with $1,000, where you're more in stability, we want to start seeding kind of some long-term habits. So creating something that you can start doing now that maybe it's not 100% of the time that you can do it, but something that if you make a habit out of it will have a long-term benefit, which would be doing something like putting some money towards a Roth IRA, creating some sort of sinking fund for maybe a car repair or travel that you want to be doing in the more near-term future. And then at this stage, this is where we start saying you can have some guilt-free money. You got $1,000. We don't want to be the party poopers that say, you cannot spend any of that and don't spend any of it on yourself. We want you to have some guilt-free money in there that you can feel good about having that extra $1,000. But we would say don't put it all in guilt-free and just go ahead and blow it right away. So you want to avoid any analysis paralysis and see if you could start doing something like automating funds to your Roth or your brokerage account, and get that to be a more consistent thing that you do and kind of make that into a habit. The growth and freedom stage is where you start having the ability to do more things. So that's where right now you're probably doing some investing, your goals are getting there. $1,000 isn't necessarily going to make or break in this stage. So maybe put some money into your personal growth or your personal health, and do some things that you want to do to just kind of keep your life as optimal as possible, keep your health good. So that's kind of the area where investing isn't quite as important because it's such a small amount. But if you're already doing those other things, investing still won't hurt. So it's less about what you do and more about doing it consistently at this stage so that you can keep moving forward with that. And then if you're already at the financial freedom zone, feel free to just blow that money on whatever you want to do. And if you have something that you're eyeing, or if you really don't, throw it in investments, or put it in maybe a high risk investment if you want to, or start putting it towards the next trip that you're planning. But financial freedom, $1,000 isn't going to really do much for you to make a break in that situation. So next one, $10,000. So this is where at the lower levels, this can really make or break in the survival stage. So you want to stabilize your core life systems in a stage like this. You want to make sure that you have an emergency fund beyond just that regular emergency fund. So I would say ideally you want to be 1 to 2 months in Southern California here. $10,000 probably isn't even going to cover 1 to 2 months of your living expenses, depending on your situation. So I'd say if you can get 3,000 of that $10,000 into an emergency fund, that would be ideal. The next 3 to 5,000 roughly, I'd say you want to pay down any high interest debt that you have, and make sure that you cover anything that is the highest interest first so that you can start paying that down. And then hopefully you won't have more than 5,000 in debt, but if you do, I'd probably go higher on this on that section, and do the full 7,000 that you have left to get that paid off. If it's less, then you can start doing things like catching up on doctors and healthcare appointments you haven't been going to because cash has been so tight, doing a car repair that you needed to do. And if you still have leftover funds, you can do a basic Roth IRA startup and try to start building a discipline, and getting yourself in the habit of funding a Roth with some of that money that you now are saving on the debt payments. In the stability stage, this is where we kind of want to layer in the wealth building habits. So, perfect time to max out your IRA, put whatever money you need for the year to get that IRA to the 7,000 max or 8,000 if you're over the age of 50. Anything left over, this is when you want to start looking into funding a brokerage account, or if you already have a brokerage account, adding it to that, and then maybe setting some aside for self-improvements or setting aside for a planned expense that you have coming up. Next is the growth and the freedom stages. We'll just combine these two because 10,000 is kind of in that same range of uh it can add to your plan, but it's not going to make a huge or major difference. So now is when we start talking about things like the bucket strategy that we talk about, putting money into a high yield savings account for a year or two from now and saving some money there. Maybe a more intermediate one with a bond heavy or a CD ladder, and then money in equities for later years, kind of splitting it up. Or at this point, you can also consider with this money using it to automate your life a bit more and buy yourself a little bit of time, which we'll cover more on a bit later. But maybe do something like if you typically mow the lawn, hire a landscaper. If you typically were one that cleans the house, maybe hire a house cleaner if you're in the growth and financial freedom stage. So, if you could use that $10,000 to do something like that to buy yourself more time to do the things you love, great opportunity there. Lastly, $100,000. So, really, this doesn't matter what stage you're in. The first thing you want to do, $100,000 is not something to take lightly at this point. So you want to first off pause and plan. You don't want to rush into doing anything. You want to kind of lay out your goals, define your goals, and figure out what it is you want to do. You want to pay off any toxic debt. So no matter what stage of life you're in, you could have debt over 7 and 8%. So highest interest rate goes first, but you want to make sure that anything that's a toxic debt is getting paid off just so you're not wasting money towards interest. And then you want to make sure that your emergency fund is completely topped off, 6 to 12 months of expenses are covered, and then kind of have an idea of where you're going to split the rest of the assets beyond those things. So once all three of those things are covered in any stage, you now should have, and most people will already in the later stages probably have a lot of extra money, most of the 100,000 left, but you want to start splitting it into more tax advantage. So max out your tax advantage opportunities, whether it's a Roth, whether it's a 401k, an HSA, 529 plans. You have many opportunities to get money into tax advantage situations. So that's where I would start first. Then I'd put additional money into brokerage for long-term investing. So that's money that you can use and take out if something comes up, but is really more targeted for the long-term investing. Then maybe if you wanted to buy an additional property, a rental property, an Airbnb, or your first home, home down payment in real estate, having a little bit of extra of that peeled off of there. And then back to the life optimization and buying back time. This is where when you have 100,000, if you're working and you can buy back some of your time so you can make more money at work or work harder elsewhere, it's a great opportunity to really help you maximize your situation. And then $100,000, I'd say you want to use some of that money for fun, travel, dream fund, whatever it is. $100,000, you should probably give yourself a little bit of some reward if you're doing all of these other things, because again, we don't want to think that we're the no fun zone here and that you don't want to reward yourself for however this 100,000 came to you or do a trip in the memory of the person that left you the money. So again, a little bit of money can be peeled off to do something fun and travel with it. So, and again, you don't have to do all of this at once. It's something that you could slowly trickle into, depending on your thoughts and how you planned and did all of the first three steps ahead of this. So, I think this topic is a great topic for both coming into money, But I think it's also a really good topic for those of you who are in the stage where they're not married yet or are newly married to start having a conversation about what you would do with each of these financial windfalls, because inheritance do happen, and it's one of the things that I think gets disagreed upon a lot in marriages is what you're going to do with the money that you have newly inherited. So I think having a plan and having alignment before it happens is a lot easier, so you can hold each other accountable when it happens to what you talked about previously. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you for coming to another episode of Financial Tides. We'll see you next time.
John Perillo and Taylor Perillo are financial advisors offering securities through Cetera Advisors LLC, a registered broker-dealer, doing insurance business in California as CFGA Insurance Agency LLC, member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cetera Investment Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Cetera firms are under separate ownerships from any other named entity. California insurance licenses number 0F60123 and 0M90666, 6265 Greenwich Drive, Suite 251, San Diego, California 92122. The views depicted in this material are for information purposes only and are not necessarily those of Cetera Advisors LLC. They should not be considered specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Neither Cetera Advisors LLC nor any of its representatives may give legal or tax advice.